August 1954. San Francisco Bay. Cold wind, gray water. No noise except the engine. Ellsworth Raymond Bumpy Johnson sat on the transport boat with his wrists chained and his eyes calm. He wasn't talking. He wasn't asking questions. He was thinking. He had been sentenced for narcotics conspiracy. The government had made a decision. They weren't sending him to just another prison. They were sending him to Alcatraz, the Rock, a place designed not to punish the body, a place designed to break the mind. The guard sitting across from him watched him for most of the trip. Later, he would tell another officer, "He didn't look scared. He looked like a man planning something." The boat cut through the water and the island came into full view. Concrete, wire, towers, no color, no softness. Just stone rising out of the bay like it wanted to be alone. Alcatraz didn't negotiate. Men were brought there because the government was finished arguing with them. Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, now Bumpy Johnson. The doors opened. The cuffs came off. The processing began. Number, clothes, rules. No conversations in line. No talking during meals. No illusions about escape. The warden made the same speech he'd given hundreds of times. "You were somebody out there. You are not somebody here." Most prisoners believed him. Bumpy didn't. He listened without emotion, anger, or reaction. Then he was walked down the cell block. Echoing footsteps, steel clanging shut behind steel. Inmates looked at him through bars. Some recognized the face. Harlem knew him. Word traveled, even on an island. They expected a loud man, a violent man, a man who needed to prove something. That's not who they saw. They saw a man who paid attention. That made people nervous. Days became routine. Work, silence, meals, lockdown. Routine was the real punishment. Routine was the method. Routine erased identity. Except Bumpy didn't erase. He adapted. He studied officers' movements. He studied schedules. He studied people. And at night, when most inmates stared at walls and counted the cracks, Bumpy read. Not comics, not newspapers, philosophy, history, poetry. A Harlem gangster sitting in the most feared prison in the United States, reading Nietzsche and Omar Khayyam. Other inmates started noticing something else. He wasn't just reading. He was thinking out loud in conversations that didn't look like trouble but were. About rules, about treatment, about conditions. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He asked questions like, why is this procedure necessary? Who benefits from this rule? What right do they have to impose this without explanation? Those questions spread. Inmates started asking them too, not violently, calmly. Guards hated violence. Administration feared organized calm. Within months, prison paperwork quietly recorded it. Johnson displays leadership influence among inmates. They didn't call it protest, not officially, but inside the cells people knew what it was: organization. Bumpy Johnson had entered Alcatraz as a prisoner. He was becoming something else inside it, a man the system could not control easily, not because he fought the loudest, but because he thought the deepest. September 1954. Alcatraz, cell block D. Bumpy Johnson had been inside for 4 weeks. 4 weeks of counting steps, 4 weeks of observing routines, 4 weeks of listening. He noticed things the guards didn't. Which officers were impatient, which ones liked attention, which ones could be reasoned with. He noticed things the inmates didn't, who feared authority and who resented it, who controlled informal networks inside the block, who spread information faster than the guards realized. One evening, during lights out, he started talking quietly to a cellmate, an older man from Chicago serving time for bank robbery. "Do you notice how they do breakfast?" Bumpy said. "Everything is timed, everything is measured, and nothing is fair." The man shrugged. "What can we do? It's Alcatraz." Bumpy smiled faintly. "Nothing. Not yet. But someday, we'll make them listen without a single punch thrown." By the second month, whispers spread. Inmates began bringing him small requests, questions about rules, appeals to guards, and ways to make their hours slightly easier. Guards noticed too, not officially, but in casual conversations. "He's different," one officer said. "Calm, but watchful, and he talks to the others." They listen. Bumpy didn't just talk. He wrote poetry on scraps of paper, thoughts on philosophy borrowed from the prison library, notes about logic, structure, and organization. Every piece he wrote had a purpose. It wasn't just for himself. It was instruction for anyone paying attention. By November, small incidents started occurring. A food protest that normally would have been violent was organized quietly. Inmates refused to leave their workstations until a grievance was answered. Politely, not angrily. Guards reported confusion over compliance and morale. Alcatraz had a hierarchy. Formal, enforced, brutal. Bumpy created an informal one. Not by fear, not by force, but by presence. He learned fast. Anger is visible. Calm is invisible. Influence is permanent when it doesn't rely on fear. One day a guard approached the warden. "Sir, there's a man in D block, Ellsworth Johnson. He's different. The others are listening to him. They're asking him questions. They're following instructions. Quietly, but it's happening." The warden didn't smile. "Make sure he doesn't start a riot, that's all." Bumpy Johnson wasn't starting a riot. He was teaching the inmates how to move without being moved. Books became his tools. Conversations became his strategy. By December 1954, he had not broken rules, but he had bent the flow of influence. Inmates followed him because they trusted him. Guards monitored him because they feared what they couldn't measure. Administration ignored him because they didn't know what to do. And all the while, Bumpy continued reading Plato, Omar Khayyam, Shakespeare, sometimes aloud, sometimes quietly. But every time he read, he tested attention. Who noticed? Who cared? Who might follow? Alcatraz had been built to crush men. Bumpy Johnson was learning to move inside it like a king on a chessboard. They expected Alcatraz to break Bumpy Johnson instead. It educated him. Inside those walls, surrounded by killers, spies, thieves, and the worst the government could find. Bumpy did something nobody saw coming. He slowed down. He observed. He studied. Not just people, but ideas. Most inmates used the yard. Bumpy used the library. Prison records show something interesting about him during this period. Bumpy Johnson checked out more books than almost any other inmate in his block. Philosophy, poetry, political theory, Marcus Garvey, Nietzsche, Shakespeare, W.E.B. Du Bois, a Harlem street legend, sitting in Alcatraz, underlining sentences in philosophy books. That contrast alone feels unreal, but it happened, and there was a reason. Bumpy wasn't reading for entertainment. He was studying systems. He had watched how the government worked. He had watched how banks worked. He had watched how the Italian mafia worked. He wanted to know, why do some men rule and others obey? Power fascinated him. Control fascinated him. Order fascinated him. And suddenly Alcatraz, when the prison meant to cage him, turned into his classroom. There are stories from other inmates that sound almost unbelievable the first time you hear them. Bumpy Johnson, the same man who once ordered brutal beatings on the streets of Harlem, was allegedly writing poetry at night. Short lines, sharp language, reflections on Harlem, on freedom, on betrayal, on America, no audience, no applause, no reputation to maintain. Just a man, alone in a cell, writing thoughts he couldn't say out loud. And this is the part that surprises people most. Bumpy Johnson was not stupid muscle. He was thoughtful, calculated, quiet when he needed to be. Alcatraz didn't just hold him, it refined him, respected by guards and inmates. Now here's where the story bends even more. Alcatraz was divided by race, by power groups, and by politics. Yet somehow, Bumpy walked through the yard with something rare. Respect, not fear. Respect. Inmates respected him because he didn't brag, he didn't whine, he didn't fold. Guards respected him because he didn't cause pointless trouble. When he spoke, it mattered. And when something unfair happened, he didn't explode, he organized. There are stories that he helped settle disputes before they became riots, advised younger inmates to read instead of fight, held quiet influence without shouting about it. He learned something major in Alcatraz. Violence controls streets. Intellect controls empires, and he wanted the second one. Think about this. A man goes into the hardest prison in America, the most isolated, the most psychologically crushing environment possible. And instead of losing his mind, he builds it. No flashy speeches, no dramatic scenes, just quiet transformation. That was the danger of Bumpy Johnson. He wasn't just a fighter. He became a thinker. And that combination, that's lethal. Before Alcatraz, Bumpy Johnson was a Harlem gangster. After Alcatraz, he was something else. More disciplined, more patient, more strategic. He wasn't playing street games anymore. He was thinking about politics, economics, social control, community influence. And that new version of Bumpy, the one sharpened by philosophy and isolation, is the one Harlem would soon meet again. The streets had no idea what was coming. Alcatraz had one rule that mattered above all. Don't challenge the system. Most inmates understood that. They kept their heads down, did their time, and prayed the place didn't swallow them whole. Bumpy Johnson didn't challenge with fists. He challenged with organization. That was far more dangerous. Alcatraz wasn't just cold in temperature. It was cold in humanity. Men went months without letters. Food was barely food. Medical complaints vanished into paperwork. But the worst? Silence. The place was designed to break communication, break unity, and break identity. Bumpy noticed something. When men complained alone, nothing happened. When men complained together, guards paid attention. So he didn't scream. He didn't threaten. He didn't grandstand. He listened first. He moved bunk to bunk, table to table, yard corner to yard corner. Not loud, just present. Quiet questions. You still haven't seen the doctor? They stopped your mail again? How long you been waiting on that appeal update? He was collecting data before anyone even realized what he was doing. Then came the spark. A group of inmates had been promised work detail changes. Safer assignment, less physically damaging. The promise vanished. No explanation, no paperwork, just gone. Normally, that would end with rage, solitary confinement, and more punishment. This time, it didn't. This time, men refused to move. They didn't riot. They didn't burn anything. They didn't attack guards. They sat down, calm, unified, unmoving. It spread through the block like electricity. And whose name quietly floated around the yard? Bumpy. Not as the shouter, not as the front man, as the organizer. The thinker in the background who understood. The most powerful fist is a group of men refusing to stand. Alcatraz guards weren't stupid. They could tell the difference between chaos and coordination. This wasn't random anger. This was strategy. Meetings happened. Eyes watched Bumpy more closely. They didn't see a rioter. They saw something totally different. A man other men listened to. Yet here's the interesting part. He wasn't reckless. He didn't try to blow up the prison, didn't push people to suicide missions, didn't lead them into pointless punishment. He pushed for dignity inside a place built to erase it. Better treatment, fair procedure, human recognition, and that made him dangerous in a different way. In prison, respect is a currency. Have too little, you're prey. Have too much, you're a threat. Bumpy was now somewhere in between. Guards respected his intelligence, inmates respected his composure, administration watched his influence. He wasn't the loudest voice in the cell blocks. He was the one others quieted down to hear. Men serving life, men with nothing to lose, men broken by isolation, saw someone who refused to bend inward, and it rattled the institution, because Alcatraz worked best when men believed they were powerless. Bumpy Johnson did not believe that, not for 1 second. This is the part of Bumpy's life people don't talk about in movies. Not the shootouts, not the clubs in Harlem, not the headlines, but this, a man standing in the most feared prison in America, thinking, reading, organizing, refusing to disappear into the silence. He didn't just survive Alcatraz. He learned how systems break and how men break systems. And that lesson, he would carry it back to Harlem because Alcatraz didn't just hold him, it forged him. There is a strange kind of silence in Alcatraz at night. Not peaceful silence, a heavy one. The kind that presses down on your chest, that makes walls feel like they're breathing. The kind where every memory you've been trying to outrun finally sits on the bed with you. Most men broke during those hours. Bumpy Johnson wrote, he didn't have much. A bed, a thin blanket, a metal toilet, a wall you could knock on and hear nobody answer, and a small notebook. In that notebook, he didn't write orders, didn't plan robberies, didn't map Harlem streets. He wrote about freedom, black identity, loneliness, power, loyalty, betrayal, simple handwriting, strong sentences. Not written for the world. Written because if he didn't get the thoughts out, they'd eat him alive. Some inmates said they saw him sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at the page for a long time before a single word appeared. He was choosing carefully. Gangsters don't usually leave paper trails. Poets do. And inside Alcatraz, Bumpy balanced both. He didn't have friends he could trust. So he found something else. He found authors. He'd lie back, one arm under his head, book in the other hand, and travel anywhere but that island. The works he read weren't light stories. They were the kind that punched back. Philosophers asking why societies were unequal, writers questioning law and morality, thinkers challenging authority. The prison thought they were giving him punishment. They were actually giving him teachers. And he absorbed everything, line after line, idea after idea, until something dangerous began forming, a worldview. Before prison, Bumpy was fast. Fast to anger, fast to act, fast to dominate a room. Alcatraz slowed him, not physically, mentally. He started waiting before speaking, watching before moving, letting other men reveal themselves first. He was developing something essential: patience. He learned that the loudest man in the room is almost never the most powerful. Real power is quiet, still, and timed. He began to see life less like a street fight and more like a chessboard. In Harlem, Harlem was full of pieces. Communication in Alcatraz was restricted, which meant only creative men spoke. Small taps through concrete, soft whispers in the yard when guards turned. A short note passed under a bowl. It wasn't what they said that mattered. It's what they trusted Bumpy enough to say. Men told him fears, family stories, dreams they'd never see. He wasn't just a gangster anymore. He was becoming something else: a confidant, a strategist, a man other men leaned toward in darkness. And he listened, truly listened, because for the first time in years, no music was playing, no streets were calling, no power struggles distracted him, just minds, broken, angry, brilliant, and trapped. Remember this: Alcatraz wasn't designed to rehabilitate. It was designed to erase. To take a man and sand him down until nothing recognizable remained. But sometimes, pressure doesn't erase. Pressure crystallizes. The impulsive Harlem enforcer was slowly becoming measured, philosophical, strategic. He didn't say much, but when he did, men stopped moving. They felt it. This man is thinking 3 steps ahead. This man is not lost. This man is waiting. Somewhere in that cell between the poems and the books, and the long nights staring at the ceiling, Bumpy Johnson made a decision nobody could see, but Harlem would eventually feel. He wasn't coming back as a street soldier. He wasn't coming back as a hot-headed enforcer. He was coming back as something far more controlled. A leader, not elected, not appointed, recognized, and the island prison everybody feared was the place that made him ready. There's a sound you never forget in prison, the sound of a lock turning for you. Not to shut you in, to let you out. For years, Bumpy Johnson woke up to metal, orders, routine, and the same stretch of gray walls. And then one morning, the gate opened. Not fast, not dramatically, just a simple mechanical click. But for a man who'd spent years on an island built to erase him, that sound felt like thunder. He didn't rush. Men who rush look scared. Bumpy picked up his things slowly. A few letters, worn shoes, the mind he sharpened inside those walls. He walked the corridor he had memorized in fragments. Steps echoing, guards watching without speaking. And for the first time in a long time, the air ahead of him didn't belong to Alcatraz. It belonged to possibility. A boat ride waited. The same cold water surrounding the rock felt different now. When he came in, it was a barrier. Leaving, it was a threshold. Here's the truth people don't like to say. The world does not pause because a man goes to prison. Harlem had kept moving. New faces, new bosses, new rules on corners he once controlled. Clubs changed names. Alliances shifted. People he knew had either risen or vanished. Prison freezes the prisoner. Life outside keeps running. So when Bumpy came back, the city was familiar, but not the same, and neither was he. He stepped onto those Harlem streets like a man returning to an old photograph, only to find the people have aged without him. But there was something in the air. Recognition. Whispers moved quickly. Bumpy's back. The news of his return passed from ear to ear, bar to bar, corner to corner. A name returning to its geography. He didn't storm back, demanding respect. He didn't announce war. He sat down. Small restaurants, quiet booths, coffee cups that went cold while people talked, and they all realized the same thing. The Bumpy who left Harlem was gone. The man in front of them now spoke slower, watched more carefully, reacted less, and thought before he did anything, prison hadn't broken him. It had cleaned the noise out of his head. He was done proving he was tough. Everybody already knew that. Now he wanted something larger. Control. Not the loud kind. The kind you hardly see until it's already there. Here's the extraordinary thing. Stories of Alcatraz followed him back. Not about violence, about behavior. Guards who respected him, inmates who listened to him, protests organized without chaos. That kind of mythology spreads quietly and changes how people treat you before you even speak. To Harlem, he was no longer just the enforcer, the muscle, the man who could flip a room with a look. He was now the thinker, the strategist, the man who read philosophy behind bars and came back carrying it in his eyes. And that look, that calm, measured, unshakable look, unsettled people much more than anger ever did. He didn't rush back into the game. That's what surprised everyone. No explosions, no immediate retaliation, no theatrical return. He watched. He walked through neighborhoods quietly, seeing who stood where, who really pulled strings, who pretended they did. He had learned something in Alcatraz. You never move first, you move last, and make it count. So he waited. Let Harlem show its cards. Let men reveal their ambitions. Let streets speak. Because the next version of Bumpy Johnson wouldn't just react to Harlem. He intended to shape it. Alcatraz tried to contain him. The prison didn't make him brutal. Life already had. Alcatraz made him focused. And now he was free. Not just from the island, but from the impulsive version of himself that once lived here. That man died in a cell. The one who walked back into Harlem, he was ready to build something bigger than fear. He was ready to rule. And maybe that's the real story here. Not just a gangster, not just Harlem, not just Alcatraz, but a man who walked into the most feared prison in America and walked out quieter and somehow more powerful. A man who learned that real strength isn't in the noise you make, but in the control you refuse to lose. Bumpy Johnson didn't just survive Alcatraz. He came back with something far more dangerous than reputation, clarity, and Harlem felt it. Not in speeches, not in headlines, in the way the air changed when his name was mentioned. Because once a man learns to master himself, there's very little left in the world that can master him. Now here's my question for you. Do you think Alcatraz broke Bumpy Johnson, or do you think it finished making him? Tell me in the comments. I will read every single one. If you love stories like this, real history, real people, real consequences, then don't just scroll away. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Like the video so YouTube knows others should see it. Share your thoughts below. Your comments keeps this channel alive. This is just one chapter. Bumpy's story is far from over. And trust me, you're going to want to be here for the next part.